Hey everyone, welcome to Nightmare Narrator. Tonight, we're stepping into the quiet streets and back roads of Pennsylvania's small towns, places that seem peaceful during the day, but hide dark secrets after sundown. These are 8 disturbing true Pennsylvania small-town horror stories, encounters that prove sometimes the scariest things are happening right next door. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it for you? Now, let's step into the shadows together. I was a retired postal worker by then, living a quiet life just outside Meadville, Pennsylvania, the kind of life built on routine and small chores that numb the sting of long-standing guilt. I'd sold my late husband's family property the year before, the old land with the burial plot his ancestors tended for generations. And even now I can admit that decision still pinched behind the ribs. It was early October, 5 years ago, leaves just starting to curl and bronze, when my daughter insisted we host a little family gathering in my backyard. I remember stepping out onto the porch that morning and seeing something odd. Wet footprints on the wood, despite a clear sky for 3 days straight, each one narrow and long, like someone wearing old dress shoes. I brushed it off at first, thinking of morning dew or maybe one of my grandkids playing with the hose. But there was something about the clean edges of the prints that stuck with me like a small, innocent detail I didn't yet understand. I kept myself busy with folding chairs, grocery bags, and checking the propane tank. But there was a heaviness in the air I couldn't shake, almost like the cold metallic taste I used to get before bad storms on my mail route. When my son arrived, he made a joke about me being jittery, but I didn't tell him how my nights had been thin with sleep or how I kept dreaming of my husband standing at the edge of some field I couldn't recognize. We set up the yard, kids running around, the early October sun sinking in that soft way where everything looks gentler than it actually is. That's when I first saw him. A man at the tree line, standing as still as a marker stone, dressed in what looked like old funeral clothes, charcoal black suit, white shirt, a tie that hung too straight. He wasn't doing anything frightening, not really, just lifting his hand like he was brushing something from his sleeve in that slow, meaningless gesture people make at services when they don't know where to look. I blinked, and he was gone, which should have ended it, but the sight left a cold patch on my chest. Later that afternoon, while carrying a tray of iced tea, I caught a dark smudge on the porch where those footprints had been. I bent closer and saw a thin line of dampness, almost oily, like water mixed with soil. I called my daughter over, but when she looked, the print had already dried to nothing. She rolled her eyes, told me to relax and enjoy the gathering, and in that moment I felt an old familiar isolation settle in, the kind I used to feel when my husband was alive and angry after long days, the kind that made me doubt my own senses. I turned away and pretended it didn't matter, but something in the backyard felt shifted, almost listening, as the metallic taste returned at the back of my tongue. As evening pulled in and my grandkids chased fireflies, I kept watching the tree line even as I tried to laugh at their little games. I didn't want to see anything, but I did. He appeared again between 2 ash trees, closer this time, his shoes dripping like he'd stepped out of some invisible puddle that didn't belong to the world around us. The black leather glistened in the last threads of daylight. My brother-in-law, Jerry, caught me staring and followed my gaze, and for a second, just a second, he stiffened. "Someone out there?" he muttered. But when I described the man, Jerry frowned, shook his head, and told me I must have seen a deer or maybe a neighbor passing through. I wanted to argue, to remind him deer don't wear funeral shoes, but my throat tightened, and the moment passed like it had never existed at all. When most of the family went inside for dessert, I stayed out to collect the plates and heard something soft behind me. A slow drip, 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 like water falling from fabric. I turned, and there he was again, standing beside the old maple just 10 yards away, his head slightly tilted as though he couldn't quite decide if he recognized me. His face was shadowed, not hidden, but blurred in a way light shouldn't allow, as if I were seeing him through old, wavering glass. Panic rose fast and breathless in my chest as I backed towards the porch, my heartbeat pounding so loudly I could barely hear the cricket song. For a moment, I felt an icy brush across my ankle, a cold so sharp it left a pale, finger-shaped mark I still carry. I gasped and stumbled inside, dropping half the plates. No one believed me, of course. My daughter said I probably twisted something or brushed against the porch rail. Jerry claimed I'd worked myself into a scare. I wanted to tell them about the cold, about the dripping shoes, about how he always stood at the exact edge of where our property line used to run before I sold the family land. But the words felt heavy and foolish in my mouth. Instead, I distracted myself by checking the old family photo taped to the fridge, the one taken back before my husband got sick. Only now, I noticed a dark shape near the back, behind the barn, almost a man-shaped shadow, just barely there, and I don't remember it ever being part of the picture. When the gathering thinned and the house grew quieter, I stepped back outside alone. The grass was cold under my feet, and the woods pressed darker than they should have for the hour. I whispered an apology into the night, something I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. A guilt that selling that land had cut the last tie to my husband's history. The trees rustled, though the air was still, and for a moment I thought I saw his outline again, but this time he didn't stay. The darkness seemed to fold him away like an old memory. 5 years later, that pale mark still sits on my ankle, and the photo on my fridge keeps its strange shadow no matter how many times I try to retake it. My family doesn't visit as often, and I find myself avoiding arguments when they do, because I've learned something I wish I didn't know. Whenever voices raise or old resentments spark, I see him again at the tree line, dripping shoes planted in the earth we no longer own, watching us like he's counting the ways we fail each other. And if you ever notice wet footprints on a dry porch in October, don't ignore them. That's usually the first sign he's found a reason to come back. Before we jump into the next story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We really need your love and support. I'd gotten used to the quiet routine of being the last person on the school grounds every evening, wiping down cafeteria tables and mopping halls until the smell of bleach felt like part of my skin. Lock Haven in early spring always felt too wide and too empty after hours, with the Susquehanna running high and fast behind the playground, swollen from the season's floods. I'd walk the perimeter before heading home, partly out of duty and partly because I never liked going back to my apartment right away. Too many hours alone meant too much room for old guilt to creep in. That night, 2 years ago, the dusk settling behind the gym made everything look washed out. And as I walked the path by the creek tunnel, I saw a small figure crouched near the opening. At first I thought it was one of the 7th graders messing around, but the figure wasn't moving, just dipping a hand in the water like it was testing the temperature. Something about that innocent little motion tugged at the part of me that remembered ignoring kids who needed me when I was younger, and I almost called out before I realized I couldn't make out any features at all. I blamed the dim light and my tired eyes, told myself it was probably a leftover from the after-school program slipping away before the buses left. When I stepped closer, the figure was gone, leaving only the smell of algae and rust drifting out of the tunnel, stronger than usual, sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. I shook it off and went back to work, humming an old song to steady myself. But when I returned to the custodial closet, one of the lost and found items I'd sorted earlier, a little boy's faded red rain jacket, was draped neatly over my mop bucket. I hadn't touched it. I even checked the security footage with the office secretary the next morning, but she said she didn't see anything unusual, and later claimed she couldn't remember me asking at all. That's when the unease settled in deeper. Not dramatic or sudden, just a steady drip of wrongness like the tunnel's runoff echoing in my head. A few nights later, I heard something while hauling out the trash near the creek. It was quiet at first, a small splash that made me freeze because the creek was moving fast, and no kids should have been anywhere near it. I stepped closer and heard a voice calling, thin and stretched through the tunnel's hollow mouth. Help. Just that one word, high-pitched but eerily steady, and I remember whispering to myself that it had to be an echo from somewhere else, maybe teenagers messing around. But when I leaned down with my flashlight, a small hand reached out from the darkness, pale and dripping, fingers splayed like it was reaching for my wrist. My heart jumped into a breathless run-on panic as I dropped the bag and stumbled back, and the hand slid away into the black like it was being pulled by something unseen. When I ran inside and told our night supervisor, he chuckled nervously and said I'd probably seen an animal, maybe a raccoon. I could tell he didn't believe himself, and the way he avoided my eyes made the fear settle deeper in my chest. After that, the voice started calling more often whenever I walked past the tunnel, always the same soft plea drifting out with that algae and rust smell that followed me all the way home. I started dreaming about water pooling under my bed, and woke up with damp hair one morning, though I swore the apartment was dry. I tried recording the voice on my phone, but the audio came back warped, filled with this low, bubbling hiss, and just faintly behind it, a child humming a tune from the 80s I recognized but couldn't place. When I played it for the school counselor, she frowned and said it sounded like interference, though her expression tightened like she'd heard something she didn't want to admit. Later that day, she claimed the file I sent her wouldn't open, and asked if I'd imagined the whole thing. That dismissal stung more than I expected, probably because it echoed every moment I'd brushed past someone who needed help when I was younger, and didn't stop to listen. Walking near the creek became something I dreaded, but avoiding it felt worse, like ignoring the voice made my skin tighten with a cold guilt I couldn't shake. One evening, as thunder rolled somewhere far off, I heard the voice again. Closer this time, not echoing but whispering just at the tunnel's mouth. I took a step toward it, then another, until the cuff of my jeans soaked through, and I felt a small tug at my ankle, gentle but insistent. The air smelled thick with algae and rust, and a cold breath brushed my knee like someone was kneeling there. I backed away, stumbling harder than I meant to, and when I got back inside, the hem of my pants left little muddy prints on the clean tiles. Later, I found a thin bluish mark on my ankle shaped like 3 small fingertips, faint but undeniable, a touch I can still feel whenever the weather shifts. The last night it happened, I'd stayed late finishing inventory, and the whole building felt swollen with the rising river, each fluorescent light flickering in a way that made shadows stretch too far. I don't know why I walked toward the creek instead of my car. Maybe habit, maybe guilt, maybe something else. But as soon as I reached the tunnel, water surged around my boots, and the voice rose to a desperate whisper. I saw him then, or something like him, standing just inside the tunnel's darkness, dripping and faintly glowing like moonlight on moving water. A boy about 10, wearing a rain jacket just like the one I'd found by the mop bucket. He lifted his hand like he'd been waiting. I don't remember stepping into the water, only the sudden cold climbing up my ribs and the feeling of being pulled forward, gentle but unavoidable, like someone guiding me by the shoulders. My flashlight flickered, and everything sank into dark, and when I came back to myself, I was standing on the grass by the playground, soaked through as if I'd been pulled from the river itself. My coworker found me wandering toward the building and later insisted I must have slipped and fallen, though she swore I was dry when she first saw me. It's been 2 years, and the smell of algae and rust clings to my clothes, no matter how much I wash them. A damp scent that follows me like a reminder. The recording on my phone still exists. The audio warped with that strange humming, and every time I try to delete it, it reappears in a different folder. I'm not the same since that night. The nights feel swollen, my skin prickles around water, and sometimes I hear a faint splash outside my window even when the weather's dry. If you ever walk near a creek tunnel in spring, especially when the floods are rising, listen carefully. If you hear a child's whisper drifting out of the dark, don't answer it. After losing my job the year before, my life had narrowed into the kind of routine that makes time feel like an empty hallway, each day echoing the same tired steps. Working IT support from home in Butler, Pennsylvania, wasn't the fresh start I'd imagined. It just meant more hours alone in the small January house I'd once shared with friends before they moved on with their lives. Nights were the worst because the place felt too big for one person, especially with the attic stretching over me like a dark second story of unsorted memories. I'd grown used to the quiet until the night something broke it. At 3:14 a.m., I heard a slow, dragging creak from the attic steps, a sound almost like a boot shifting its weight, and it stopped on the second step. That particular step had always made an unusually long, low groan, something I'd considered a harmless quirk, but that night it felt like the house exhaled at me. I tried to tell myself it was just the cold settling the wood. January nights get brutal up here, and old houses complain in their own ways, but something about the exactness of the time nagged at me. My phone screen had glowed 3:14 a.m. sharp, and the room carried this faint chill that left a metallic taste at the back of my teeth. The same taste I used to get when panic attacks hit during the months after I got laid off. To calm myself, I checked the kitchen for drafts, tightened the furnace filter, and made a half-hearted attempt to laugh at my own jumpiness. But when I walked past the attic door, I noticed one of my tools, a small socket wrench I'd left downstairs, sitting on the top stair. I assumed I must have absent-mindedly set it there at some point, though I couldn't recall ever carrying it up, and the idea that I was forgetting things scared me almost as much as the noise. The next morning I called my cousin, who used to work construction, and he joked that I sounded like an old man complaining about floorboards. He told me all houses make noise when cold fronts roll through, and when I mentioned the wrench being moved, he chuckled and said I probably set it there without noticing. But later that day, when I checked the attic again, the wrench was gone. I looked through every box, every dusty corner, until the cold in that cramped space made my fingertips prickle, and when I finally found it, it was sitting on the second step exactly where I thought I'd first seen it. My cousin claimed I must have moved it, forgotten it, then found it again, out of order. His dismissiveness left me feeling even more foolish and isolated, like there was a thin layer of disbelief between me and the rest of the world. That night, I fell asleep on the couch with the TV low, more for comfort than entertainment. Around the same hour, 3:14 a.m., I woke to a heavy stillness pressing against the house. Then the sound came again, the first step giving a soft thump, and the second step letting out that long, low groan, almost wet in tone, like someone dragging a damp shoe across old wood. I sat up too fast and felt a pinch at the base of my neck, a spot that throbbed with a strange heat. My breath stuttered in a short, run-on gasp as I stared at the attic door, convinced that if the third step sounded, I'd see the handle turn. But it never came, and in that silence, the metallic taste rushed back, stronger, like my body was reacting before my mind could reason. During the day, I kept noticing little things around the house that didn't add up. A picture frame on my desk had shifted so the person in the photo, me at a younger, happier time, looked slightly blurred, as if the camera had caught me mid-movement, though I knew the image had been crisp before. My coworker on Slack joked that winter isolation was making me see ghosts when I mentioned the noises, but he also admitted he'd heard something on a call earlier that morning, a faint wooden groan in the background. When I asked about it again later, he said he didn't remember hearing anything at all, and that quick denial sent a cold ripple down my spine. I tried staying up the following night, determined to catch whatever was causing it. I sat in the hallway, wrapped in a blanket, watching the attic door like it was a stage curtain about to rise. The house felt like it was holding its breath, and around 3 a.m., the cold settled deeper. At 3:14, right on time, the first step creaked slowly, the sound pulling up from the boards like muscle tightening. Then the second step answered with that stretched, groaning exhale, longer this time, vibrating faintly through the floor and into my ankles. I gripped the blanket so hard my hands tingled, unable to look away. When the sound faded, I realized something warm had trickled down my neck. I touched it and felt a thin ridge of swollen skin, like a shallow burn, a mark that's still there now, pink and oddly smooth. Over the next few days, I kept hearing slight noises in the house, soft thumps in the ceiling or a shift in the hallway, always small enough to doubt, but frequent enough to unsettle. I recorded the attic steps using my phone's voice memos, hoping to catch the sound. The recording captured something, but it wasn't just the steps. Instead, it held a faint, rhythmic pulse beneath the creak, almost like breathing. When I played it back the next day, the file warped halfway through, the audio dipping into static before cutting off entirely. No matter how many times I recorded, no file ever played correctly beyond the second step's groan. Sleep became something I avoided. Every night around the same time, the attic repeated its two-step pattern, whether I was awake or asleep, whether I was in the hall or all the way downstairs. I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling, waiting for the first creak like someone waiting for a verdict. And when it came, the fear settled into something sharp and familiar, the same way failure had felt the morning I lost my job. The house didn't feel big anymore. It felt watchful, like something hovered just above me, always stopping on the step where it could hear me breathe. The mark on my neck never faded, and the photo on my desk still shows my face smudged like a bad reflection. I don't know if it's a trespasser, or the house shifting, or something that only needs 2 steps to get close enough. I just know that if you ever hear a long, low creak in the dead of night, one that repeats at the exact same time, don't wait for the 3rd step. Most nights 2 years ago, when the leaves around Tamaqua were already brittle and the streets emptied out right after the bars closed, I'd leave the auto shop around 11 and drive that same dead-end service road behind the old textile mill, mostly because it shaved 5 minutes off my commute and gave me a stretch of silence after listening to customers complain all day. Being a mechanic means you get used to solitude, especially late-shift solitude. And I always told myself the quiet didn't bother me, even though the truth was I carried this constant low hum of paranoia after years of angry men blaming me for bills they didn't want to pay. The first night I saw the truck, it was sitting at the far end of the mill's access road, engine off, just a silhouette against the fog with one headlight flickering like an old fluorescent bulb. I noticed the dent in the front fender, only because my own headlights passed over it for a second, and something about the angle of that dent felt familiar in a way I couldn't place. My routine back then was painfully simple. Clock out, wash up in the grimy bathroom with the busted hand dryer, toss my oil-stained gloves on the passenger seat, and call my sister on speakerphone as I drove home to reassure her I hadn't fallen asleep at the wheel again like I did once in my 20s. I told her about the truck the second night I saw it. Parked in nearly the same spot with the same flicker in the left headlamp, even though it was probably nothing. Maybe just a farmer checking his trailer, or someone smoking in private. She joked that I needed sleep, but her voice wavered just a little, like she remembered the old stories from the shop. Customers who got too angry, too personal. The detail that stuck with me was a sticker on the truck's back window, a faded skull that I knew I'd seen before, but I couldn't recall where. That innocent detail tugged at the back of my thoughts, unsettling, but not enough to meaningfully scare me. On the third night, when I glanced in my rear view near the midpoint of the road, I saw the truck behind me, closer than seemed reasonable given I hadn't seen headlights approach. The flickering left beam bounced across the wet asphalt, catching the same dent in the fender I'd seen twice already, and something cold settled at the base of my tongue, a metallic taste like blood or pennies. I told myself the driver had probably taken the same shortcut, and the fog distorted distance. I pulled into my driveway and watched the road for 10 minutes, waiting to see if the truck passed by. But nothing came. The next morning, I mentioned it to my boss, but he waved it off, saying, "Guys who drive old pickups always have dents in the same places, and flickering lights don't mean a thing until inspection." His dismissal left me feeling small and childish, and the isolation tightened in my chest in a way that felt too familiar. The first real proof something was wrong happened when I tried to photograph the truck on the fourth night. I slowed down just enough to snap the image in my side mirror, and the screen showed only a smear of gray light behind me. The silhouette stretched as if the metal were melting in the fog. Later, when I looked again, the dented fender appeared but twisted, angled upward as if it were seen from above, not behind. I asked my coworker Dave to take a look, and he frowned, squinted, said he saw a truck clear as day. But when I showed him the photo again a few minutes later, he swore he'd never commented on it and actually asked if I was messing with him. His sudden forgetfulness rattled me more than the picture, and from then on I felt watched, not in a dramatic way, but in that slow, creeping sense that someone knows your habits even better than you do. Driving that road turned into a nightly test of nerve. Twice I saw the flickering headlight crest the hill behind me at exactly the same moment I reached the bend near the drainage ditch. Another night I heard a horn blare once, sharp and impatient, even though the mirror showed nothing but darkness. I kept catching glimpses of that skull sticker in reflections, store windows, chrome bumpers, even the dark glass of my own toolbox at work, always quick enough to dismiss but lingering long enough to twist my stomach. The worst moment came when I heard tires crunching gravel behind me on the dead-end stretch, loud enough that I sped up without thinking, breath catching in short, panicked bursts because the sound didn't fade even when I hit 40. When I turned onto the main road, the noise stopped instantly, like someone cut a switch. One night I finally pulled over near the abandoned loading bay of the mill, telling myself I'd confront whoever was behind this before my nerves snapped completely. I stepped out with my flashlight, hands trembling, and waited for the truck to appear. I could hear its engine before I saw its lights, a low, uneven rumble I recognized from a repair job nearly a year earlier. An argument with a man who refused to pay after I fixed his suspension. A man who said he'd find me again when I didn't expect it. As the flickering headlight cut through the cold air, I felt my pocket vibrate and saw a call from my sister, her timing accidental, but enough to jolt me back inside my car. When I looked up, the road behind me was empty. Not cleared. Empty, like no truck had ever been there. I quit the shop a week later, after waking up with a small, crescent-shaped bruise on my shoulder that looked like the edge of a steering wheel pressed into my skin. I still keep the corrupted photo printed and taped inside my glove box, even though the dent in the image seems deeper every time I look. These days I work day shift at a parts warehouse in Hazleton, and I avoid back roads completely. But every night I check my mirrors compulsively, searching for that flickering left beam. If you're ever driving alone and see a truck behind you with a dented fender that seems too familiar, don't wait for it to get close. That's the sign you shouldn't ignore. I used to think the quiet in our Shippensburg duplex was a blessing, especially after my late shifts at the giant grocery store where the hum of freezer units and the beeping of registers never stopped. But that summer 5 years ago, the silence started to feel too big, too hollow, like something was waiting for me to acknowledge it. I lived with my mom back then, helping with rent while she worked nights at the Cumberbund warehouse. And most evenings, I was alone from sunset until dawn, drifting between TikTok, reheated leftovers, and the kind of loneliness that makes you talk to yourself without meaning to. It was during a picnic at Furnace Park that I first noticed the stray cat, white with a gray mask, tail straight up like it knew me. And I remember thinking how much it looked like Willow, the childhood pet I lost to a sudden seizure when I was 15. The innocent detail was the little twist in its ear, like a folded paper corner. The same as hers. And I actually whispered, "You again?" under my breath, before I realized how stupid that sounded. I didn't think much about it until later that night, when I tossed my shoes by the door and spotted a smear of dust on the hallway tile shaped like a paw print. Small and almost perfect. The kind you'd see after a cat dipped its foot in flour. I convinced myself I tracked it in from the park, or maybe stepped in chalk from the neighbors' kids. But the impression stayed in my mind, tapping at something tender I tried not to touch anymore. Losing Willow had carved out this strange place in me, a guilt I couldn't shake, like I should have noticed the signs earlier or stayed home from school that day. And sleep deprivation from the August heat made old thoughts sharper than they should have been. The first wrongness was barely a wrongness at all. A soft thump from my closet that sounded like something landing lightly on both paws, followed by a faint jingle, exactly like Willow's old collar, though we hadn't had one in the house for years. The next morning I tried to prove I was being dramatic by checking the closet again, only to find one of my work polos tugged off the hanger and lying in a tight little circle on the carpet, exactly the way cats curl up when they settle. I took a picture with my phone because I knew Mom wouldn't believe me otherwise. But when I showed her later, the image looked off. The shirt was there, but the center was warped, like a smudged fingerprint dragged across the screen. She laughed it off, told me I probably yanked it down rushing around after a long shift, and said the blur was just my camera lens. Her dismissal shouldn't have hurt, but it did, mostly because part of me needed someone else to confirm what I was afraid of, that grief had finally slipped its fingers into the corners of my vision. The first time I heard scratching at my bedroom door, it was just past midnight, loud enough to jolt me awake and sharp enough to raise goosebumps across my arms because it didn't sound like knuckles or branches or anything human. It was soft, rhythmic, almost polite, the way Willow used to ask to come in. When I opened the door, the hall was empty, but carrying a faint, warm smell like sun-baked fur, and a cold draft brushed my ankle as if something small had slipped past. Later, sitting on my bed, I caught movement near the foot of it, the mattress dipping just slightly, a pressure brushing against my calves. But when I turned on the lamp, nothing was there. I didn't say anything at work the next day because I already felt ridiculous enough, though my coworker Jess swore she saw something white darting behind my legs during my break, only to laugh it off an hour later and claim she was joking, her tone too forced to make me believe her. The nights kept getting stranger. Sometimes I'd wake to the sound of purring. Not loud, but close, threaded right against my ear. And each time I'd sit up too fast, heart racing, whispering Willow's name before I could stop myself. Once I felt something jump onto my chest, light but definite, little paws pressing through the thin fabric of my tank top. And even though my arms flinched to hold it, every part of me froze when I realized I could feel its weight, but not its warmth. Another night I caught those mismatched eyes staring from the corner, one reflecting a sickly green tint, the other a deep orangish glow, hovering low to the ground like a cat crouched before a pounce, only to blink out the moment I reached for the lamp. Each encounter left me more exhausted, more brittle around the edges, and every morning I woke with a thin red scratch somewhere new on my legs, as if something had kneaded me in the night. Eventually I printed the warped polo photo to prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind, but the printed version looked worse. The circle in the shirt stretched into a strange oval with a darker smudge in the middle, like a tiny shadow curled into a ball. I taped it to my mirror as a reminder I wasn't imagining everything. But some mornings the smudge looked slightly moved, like it shifted positions while I slept. I knew then that whatever followed me home from that picnic wasn't a stray, wasn't Willow, wasn't anything I could explain away. Maybe it crawled into the space left behind by grief. Or maybe I invited it by wanting so badly to feel that familiar weight again. But either way, my body carries the proof. A small, permanent, crescent-shaped mark on my right shin, as if a paw pressed too hard and never fully let go. I've learned to live with it now. The scratches faded, but the nightly presence never did, curling against my legs with that same phantom heaviness, the mattress dipping in the same place every time. The picture on my mirror remains warped no matter how many times I reprint it. If you ever feel something brushing your calves in the dark, gentle and warm where nothing should be, don't speak to it. That's the sign you shouldn't ignore. I'd gotten used to the lonely rhythm of my night commute through Altoona, driving the same rain-soaked back roads after overtime shifts at the warehouse, the kind that leave your shoulders buzzing with exhaustion and your thoughts drifting wherever they want. The route took me past empty fields and the long stretch of track where the railroad crossing lights clicked steadily even when no trains were scheduled, a sound that always made me think of the accident I survived years ago, but never talk about. One night last spring, just after midnight, the red lights were flashing again even though the schedule app on my phone showed nothing, and as the wipers smeared the rain across the windshield, I saw a woman standing beside the lowered barricade, like she'd been waiting for me. She lifted her hand in this hesitant little wave, almost polite, and something in that gesture felt innocent, harmless even, though I didn't know then how wrong I was. My life was already cracked around the edges in ways I didn't admit out loud, the kind of damage that comes from knowing you lived through a wreck another man didn't. We lost a coworker named Luis in a pileup on I-99 3 years back, and even now I carried the sour guilt in my chest, like a bruise that never healed. So when I saw the woman again the next night, standing in the rain wearing a soaked gray coat, I told myself she was just someone whose car broke down nearby. I rolled down the window a few inches to ask if she needed help, but she only tilted her head like she couldn't quite see me, and held her hand out toward the empty tracks. The clicking of the railroad lights seemed to slow, almost syncing with my pulse. I went home telling myself I'd been tired, that maybe she'd just walked off before I really got a good look. The first time things truly felt wrong was the night she knocked on my window. I'd stopped at the crossing again, no train listed, no headlights in the distance. The woman stepped out of the dark, leaned down to the glass, and tapped twice, her fingers pale and rain-cold. Her voice was thin but clear when she asked, "Is it safe now?" I started to answer, but she vanished the moment I blinked, leaving nothing but a smudge of condensation on the window. My chest tightened, and I snapped a shaky picture of the crossing to prove to myself she'd been there, but when I looked at the photo, her reflection seemed to appear faintly in the red glow. Except her face was turned the wrong way, looking down the road instead of at me. I showed the picture to my supervisor during break, and he squinted at it before shrugging, saying he didn't see anyone at all and suggesting I needed sleep. After that, every commute became something I braced for. The rain felt colder, carrying that faint metal smell the tracks always had, and the clicking of the lights started to echo inside my head long after I'd passed the crossing. One night I noticed the woman's coat wasn't dripping anymore, even though the rain came down hard enough to blur the whole world. Another time she stood closer to my truck, so close I could see her hair sticking to her cheeks, and when I whispered that there was no train coming, her expression tightened like she was trying to remember something she'd forgotten. I pressed the gas too fast and fishtailed slightly, my breath caught in a short run-on panic as I fled the tracks like a coward. There was a night she moved differently, stepping directly into my headlights. Her shadow didn't fall behind her but slanted sideways, sliding across the wet pavement like it belonged to someone else. She held her hand out toward me again, and I swear the clicking of the lights sounded like they were speeding up, tapping right behind my ear, even though the truck windows were shut. I tried to call out, but my voice caught, and the air in the cab tasted like rust. I slammed the door lock without meaning to, staring straight ahead until she faded into the rain. Another time she appeared right beside the passenger door, close enough that I could see the outline of what looked like a bruise on her temple. Without thinking, I reached out before remembering I shouldn't touch something I didn't understand. My hand brushed the inside panel of the door instead, but the next morning I found a dark, fingerprint-shaped mark on my wrist, as if someone had gripped me in the night. It hasn't faded. I tried showing it to a coworker, my friend Tyler, and he said it just looked like grease from work, even though I'd scrubbed my skin raw trying to get it off. I tried to avoid driving at night, staying late in the break room or asking for earlier shifts, but the one time I took a different route home, under a dim street lamp near the edge of Juniata, I still heard the clicking. Not from railroad lights this time, but from somewhere behind me, like it followed the rhythm of my rear tires. When I checked my phone's photo album later, that corrupted picture from earlier, the one where her reflection faced the wrong direction, had darkened around the edges, the red glow bleeding into her shape until she looked swallowed by it. I didn't take that picture again. Whatever was in it didn't want to settle. Last week I forced myself back onto the night commute, telling myself I couldn't let a ghost, if that's what she was, control my hours. But as soon as I neared the tracks, the clicking started again, patient and steady. She was standing there like she always had, hand raised in that small, almost shy gesture, and when I slowed the truck, she stepped closer and whispered the same question. "Is it safe now?" The bruise on her temple looked darker, newer somehow, and her breath fogged the glass in the same pattern as before. I didn't answer her. I don't think I can anymore. The mark on my wrist is still there. The corrupted photo on my phone keeps changing in ways I can't explain. And I've learned that every time I try to stop driving nights, she finds another way to appear in front of me, waiting at whatever crossing I think I've avoided. So here's the only warning I can give you. If you ever hear railroad lights clicking when there's no train scheduled, don't slow down. Don't look at the woman waiting on the other side. It started the night I dropped my coffee mug, and it rolled toward the corner of my living room, right where the boards never sat flush. I remember kneeling to grab it, my fingers brushing a thin crack between two planks. That's when I felt a draft. Cold and steady, like air was moving from somewhere underneath. I lived alone with my 8-year-old son, Ethan, in a cheap apartment I could barely afford after the divorce. The building was old, early 60s maybe, and the landlord never cared about much beyond the rent check. But that little draft, it felt wrong. The floor wasn't supposed to breathe. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I vacuumed, I'd see that uneven corner and picture what might be under it. Mold, rats, maybe some old crawl space. Still, it nagged at me. One night, after Ethan had gone to bed, I pried up the edge of one plank with a butter knife. Dust and splinters fell into the gap, and I realized there was space beneath, much more than I expected. The hollow sound echoed faintly when I tapped. I could feel the air moving stronger now. I don't know why I kept going, but something in me said I had to see. It took me nearly half an hour to loosen the boards enough to reveal a rectangular outline, barely visible seams in the wood. A handle had been removed, but I could see where it used to be. A trap door. My heart thumped as I gripped the edge and pulled. The plank groaned. The smell hit first. Damp concrete, rust, and something else, like stale air that had been trapped for decades. I grabbed a flashlight from the drawer, pointed it into the dark, and saw a ladder descending into concrete. I should have closed it right then. I should have called someone. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially when mixed with desperation. Maybe it was the idea of extra storage space or just wanting to know every corner of the place where my son slept. I climbed down. The air was colder the moment my feet touched the concrete floor. My flashlight beam trembled over walls that looked recently painted, white but streaked. There were shelves along one wall, metal, military-looking, stacked with old canned food and boxes of supplies, each labeled in careful handwriting. Water purification tablets, iodine, bandages, ration packs. Everything looked perfectly arranged, untouched by time. It wasn't like an old shelter. It was like someone had been down there recently. I whispered to myself, "What the hell is this?" My voice sounded too loud, swallowed by the low ceiling. There was a table, too, metal and clean, and beside it, a cot. The sheets were folded. On top sat a single item, a small plastic toy car, red, chipped along one side. I froze. Ethan had a toy car just like it upstairs. Same brand, same scratch on the hood. But his was blue. I picked it up. Cold. Too clean. It didn't belong to us, and yet it felt recent. A noise behind me made me spin. Not loud, just a soft creak from above, like the trap door shifting. I called out, "Ethan?" No answer. I swallowed hard and climbed halfway up the ladder, peering toward the opening. The light from my living room was still visible, but dimmer now. I reached the edge and looked around. Everything upstairs was quiet. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. I went back down, this time slower, and noticed something I hadn't seen before. Marks on the wall. Scratches, deep and uneven, running vertically like fingernail gouges. I stepped closer, raising the flashlight. There were numbers scratched into the concrete beneath them. Dates, each crossed out except the last. 12/4/99. That was tomorrow. I backed away so fast I hit the shelf behind me. A can fell, clanging across the floor. My breath came quick. Who was counting days down here? And why did it stop at tomorrow? I climbed up the ladder again, sealing the trap door as best I could. I even placed a rug over it. I barely slept that night. I wanted to believe it was some Cold War relic, maybe a previous tenant's project. But the dates were too recent. And that toy car? It had dust only on one side, like it had been moved recently. I told myself I'd call the landlord in the morning. That was the plan. When I woke up, The rug was folded neatly beside the couch. The trapdoor was uncovered. Ethan was sitting near it, playing with his blue toy car. I asked him, gently, "Did you move the rug, sweetheart?" He didn't look up. "There's a boy down there," he said. "He said his mom forgot him." I swear my body went cold all over. "What boy?" I whispered. He shrugged. "He said he used to live here." I grabbed his arm and pulled him away, my voice trembling as I said, "You don't ever go near that floor again." He just looked at me, confused and scared, and nodded. After dropping Ethan off at school, I called the landlord, but he swore there was no basement, no extra space beneath the unit. He even laughed, said the building was built solid, slab foundation. "You're imagining things," he told me. "You've got a kid and stress. Happens all the time." I hung up. I wasn't imagining it. That night, I pushed the couch over the trap door. I didn't even care if it damaged the floor. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of dragging, wood scraping against wood. I bolted upright, heart pounding, and saw the couch had shifted an inch. Something was moving it from below. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a kitchen knife, and whispered for Ethan to stay in his room. He was crying, clutching his blanket, asking what was happening. I told him it was just a dream. The scraping stopped. I stood there for maybe a full minute, trembling. Then, a sound I'll never forget. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, from underneath the floor. I wanted to scream but couldn't. I moved closer, knife shaking in my hand. The knocking came again. 3 times. Then silence. I whispered, "Who's there?" And a voice, muffled and distorted, whispered back, "You found it." I backed away so fast I tripped over the rug. My mind screamed to run, to take Ethan and leave. But then I thought of the ladder, the bunker, the dates. Tomorrow's date. I had to see what it meant. I waited until morning. Ethan stayed home from school. I didn't want him out of my sight. I told him we were leaving that night. As I packed, curiosity clawed at me again. I opened the trap door one last time, just to prove to myself I wasn't losing it. The ladder was gone. No, not removed. Gone, like the space beneath had changed. My flashlight beam revealed nothing but dirt now, freshly packed soil, uneven, damp. The shelves, the cot, everything had vanished. The smell of earth filled my throat. But there, half buried in the corner, was something red. I reached for it. The toy car. Not Ethan's blue one, the red one I'd seen before. Only this time the hood was crushed, as if someone had stepped on it. I wiped the dirt off and saw a faint carving on the bottom. EM. Those were Ethan's initials. I don't remember climbing out. I only remember locking every door, every window, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't form. We left that afternoon with nothing but clothes and a few toys. I told the landlord I was breaking the lease. He didn't argue, just said, "You're the 3rd tenant this year to move out of Unit 12. I drove straight to my sister's place in Denver, slept in her guest room with Ethan curled against me. I tried to forget, but nightmares followed for weeks. In one dream, I'm standing in the bunker again, only this time the shelves are filled with toys, hundreds of them, each one carved with initials, and I can hear children's voices whispering, "You found it." Months later, I saw an article online about a construction project near Alamosa. They'd discovered an old Cold War shelter beneath a demolished apartment block. Inside, authorities found personal belongings, kids' toys, photos, ration boxes, but no records of who built it. The article mentioned they dated the last items stored there to late 1999, the day before the building burned down from an electrical fault. I scrolled through the pictures. In one of them, half covered in ash, I saw a small red toy car. The caption read, Recovered from Unit 12. That's when I realized the date scratched into the wall hadn't been a countdown. It had been a warning. I worked the graveyard shift at Safeway on Highway 101, stocking shelves and facing products while the fluorescent lights hummed their insomniac song. The drive home took me over the Yakina Bay Bridge just after 3 in the morning, when the coast was nothing but fog and the memory of waves. I'd been making that drive for 2 years, ever since Danny died, ever since I couldn't sleep in our old apartment anymore and took the night job to fill the hours. The bridge was over 3,000 feet long, arching green steel over black water, and most nights I was the only car crossing it. I liked the isolation. It matched what I felt inside. This hollow space where my little brother used to be. This guilt that sat in my chest like swallowed glass. I should have seen it coming. The pills, the weight loss, the way he stopped answering my calls. But I didn't. And now he was gone. And I drove home every night in the dark like I was crossing over to somewhere I didn't belong. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a jogger. Stupid, I know. Who runs across a highway bridge at 3 in the morning in November with a storm rolling in off the Pacific? But there it was, caught in my headlights for maybe 2 seconds, a pale figure moving across the pedestrian walkway on the north side of the bridge. It was fast, faster than any jogger I'd ever seen. My Civic was doing 55, and this thing was keeping pace, maybe even pulling ahead, its arms and legs pumping in this weird, mechanical rhythm. I couldn't make out details. The fog was too thick, the rain too heavy. But I got an impression of something thin and white, something that moved wrong. I slowed down, craned my neck to get a better look, but by the time I reached the middle of the bridge, it was gone. Just vanished into the fog. I told myself it was a runner training for a marathon, maybe wearing reflective gear that looked pale in my headlights. But my hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and I could taste copper in my mouth, metallic and sharp, like I'd bitten my tongue. The second night, I saw it again. Same place, same time, same impossible speed. This time I was ready. I had my phone mounted on the dashboard, and I hit record as soon as I saw the shape appear in my headlights. It was on the walkway again, but closer to the railing this time, and as I passed it, I swear it turned its head to look at me. I couldn't see a face. Just this blank oval where a face should be, pale as bone. I drove the rest of the way home with my heart hammering, pulled into my apartment parking lot, and immediately checked the video. The bridge was there. The fog. The rain streaking across my windshield. But where the figure should have been, there was just empty walkway. Static and distortion right at the moment I passed it, like the camera couldn't process what it was seeing. I watched it 5 times, then 6, then stopped because my hands wouldn't stay steady. I called my mom the next morning. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to hear another voice. Maybe I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing it the way Danny had. She listened while I described the runner, the speed, the blank face. There was a long pause. Then she said, "You're working too much, honey. Night shifts mess with your head. Danny used to say the same thing, remember? Said he saw things that weren't there." I wanted to tell her this was different, that Danny's hallucinations were from the drugs, but I couldn't. Because what if she was right? What if grief was rotting my brain the same way fentanyl rotted his? I thanked her, and hung up, and didn't call again. That night, I took the bridge route again. I told myself I'd take the long way next time, the inland route that added 20 minutes but avoided the bridge entirely. But I didn't. I needed to see it again. Needed to prove it was real or prove it wasn't. The fog was thicker that night, rolling off the bay in gray waves, and the bridge lights looked like dying stars. I hit the approach doing 60, my phone recording again, and that's when I heard it. The wet slap of bare feet on metal. Loud, rhythmic, coming from the walkway beside me, keeping perfect pace with my car. I looked over and saw it running next to me, maybe 10 feet away, its pale body naked and smooth. No features I could make out except that blank oval face and the sound of its feet hitting the walkway. Slap, 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 like wet meat on a cutting board. I punched the gas. 70, 75. It stayed with me, effortless, its arms swinging, its legs blurring. The sound got louder. I could feel it through the steering wheel, through the seat, vibrating in my teeth. Then I was off the bridge, speeding down the highway toward home, and the sound stopped. Just stopped. I pulled over in a Chevron parking lot and sat there shaking until the sun came up. I showed the video to Marcus, the assistant manager at Safeway. He was the closest thing I had to a friend, someone who knew about Danny, who'd covered my shifts when I couldn't get out of bed for a week after the funeral. We sat in the break room during my lunch at 2 a.m, and I played the video on my phone. The static was there again, right when I passed the thing. But this time you could hear the sound. Faint but unmistakable. That wet, slapping rhythm. Marcus watched it twice, then handed my phone back. "That's creepy," he said. "Probably some audio glitch. You know how phone mics pick up weird interference?" I asked him if he heard the footsteps. He shrugged. "I heard something. Could be anything. Wind, maybe. Or the bridge itself. Those old steel joints make all kinds of noise." I wanted to grab him and make him listen again, make him hear what I heard. But I didn't. I just nodded and went back to stocking cereal boxes, my hands moving on autopilot while my brain tried to make sense of something that didn't want to make sense. The first real confrontation happened 3 nights later. I was halfway across the bridge when it appeared in front of my car. Not on the walkway this time, in my lane. Standing there in the middle of Highway 101, facing me, its arms hanging at its sides. I slammed the brakes. My Civic skidded on the wet pavement, fishtailed, straightened out. I stopped maybe 15 feet from it. The headlights hit it full on, and I could see it clearly for the first time. It was shaped like a person, but wrong in every detail. Too tall, too thin, limbs too long. The skin was white and wet, like something pulled from the ocean, and where its face should have been was just smooth skin, no eyes or nose or mouth, just that blank oval tilted down like it was studying me. I sat there frozen, my foot on the brake, engine idling. Then it moved. Not toward me, around me. It walked to the driver's side window, silent except for the slap of its feet on asphalt, and pressed its face against the glass. I could smell it through the vents, salt and rot, old fish and deeper water. The copper taste flooded my mouth and I gagged. Then it was gone. Just stepped back and vanished into the fog like it had never been there. The second time, it was waiting at the end of the bridge. I saw it as I came off the span, standing on the shoulder where the highway curves toward town. I didn't stop. I floored it, blew past doing 80, and it ran beside my car. Not on the road, on the guardrail. Running along the top of the metal barrier like it was a balance beam, its bare feet slapping against steel, keeping perfect pace no matter how fast I went. I could see it in my peripheral vision, a pale blur against the dark trees. And I could hear it over the engine, over the wind, that relentless slap, slap, slap. I didn't slow down until I reached my apartment, and when I checked my rearview mirror, it was standing at the edge of the parking lot, watching, waiting. The third time, I woke up at 3 p.m, and it was in my apartment. I'd fallen asleep on the couch after my shift, exhausted, my mouth still tasting like copper. When I opened my eyes, it was standing in the corner by the TV, motionless, that blank face pointed at me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My whole body locked up like I'd been paralyzed. It didn't come closer. It just stood there, and I could hear the sound of water dripping from its skin onto my carpet. A slow, steady drip, drip, drip. Then I blinked, and it was gone. But the carpet was wet, a dark stain spreading from where it had been standing. I called my landlord and told him I had a leak. He sent a guy who checked the pipes and ceiling and found nothing. The stain dried in the shape of footprints. Long, narrow footprints leading from the corner to my couch. I took a photo before the landlord's guy left, but when I looked at it later, the footprints were gone. Just blank carpet. I stopped driving over the bridge after that. Started taking the inland route, even though it added time, even though it meant I got home after sunrise and couldn't sleep. But it didn't matter. I still hear it. Every night, just after 3, that wet, slapping sound starts up somewhere in my apartment. In the walls, maybe, or under the floor. It goes on for exactly the time it would take me to cross the bridge at 60 miles per hour. 3 minutes and 20 seconds. I've timed it. And when it stops, I can smell the salt and rot, taste the copper, feel the cold that radiates from standing water. My mom thinks I need therapy. Marcus thinks I need a different job. Neither of them understands that it's not about the job or the bridge. It's about Danny. About the fact that I didn't see him drowning until it was too late. Didn't recognize the signs, didn't pull him back from whatever edge he was running toward. And now something else is running, something that moves too fast and never stops, and it's keeping pace with me the way I should have kept pace with him. There's a mark on my left shoulder now. Showed up the morning after I saw it in my apartment. 5 long parallel lines, like fingers, pale white against my skin. They don't fade. People ask about it sometimes. Think it's a scar or a birthmark. I tell them it's a rash. But late at night, when I'm lying in bed waiting for the sound to start, I can feel those fingers pressing into my skin. Can feel something keeping pace with me in the dark, running beside me through every moment, waiting for me to slow down, waiting for me to stop. The video is still on my phone. I watch it sometimes when I can't sleep. The static is worse now, spreading across the whole frame, and in the distortion you can almost see a shape, almost see a face. It's not the runner, it's Danny, or something wearing his outline. I don't know which would be worse. If you ever drive over a bridge late at night and see something running in the fog, something moving faster than your car, don't slow down. Don't try to get a better look. Don't record it, or chase it, or convince yourself it's just a jogger or a trick of light. Because once it knows you see it, once it locks onto you, it doesn't stop. It keeps pace. And eventually, when you're too tired to run anymore, when the guilt weighs you down too much to keep moving, it catches up. And then you're the one crossing the bridge, over and over, forever. That's the end of our 8 Pennsylvania small-town horror stories. Which one made your skin crawl the most? If you made it all the way, type, "The town is watching" in the comments, so I know you're one of the brave listeners. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and remember, some secrets are never meant to be uncovered.